Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My guests today are Sally Dennison and Paulette Millichap from Council Oak Books. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, glad to be here.
You guys, when I started writing and told all my friends and family in Tahlequah and Tulsa that I wanted to write a novel, I suddenly started getting flyers in the mail, your career in optometry, your career in real estate, because they didn't feel that my goals as a writer were realistic expectations. And I can't help but wonder what sort of response you got when you told people that you were going to join with Michael Hightower and start a publishing company, not in New York, not in Boston, not in LA, but in Tulsa, Oklahoma. What happened, Paulette?
Well, that question obviously is throwing me a little bit. What did happen? I'm to remember back to those days. There was a moment there of feeling, yes, we need a publishing house right here in the middle of the country. It was a moment of possibility and opening. I think that's why we leaped into it. Little independent publishers were forming all over the country. It was in response to the major New York houses becoming more and more rigidified in only blockbuster publishing. They were being bought out and becoming conglomerates. So the feeling was, yes, the vitality is in the country. It's all around. And publishing had always been in New York, but it didn't have to be there. And there was an energy and enthusiasm. And so I don't think we really had that much negativity or feeling that we couldn't do it.
Well, it says a lot for the community, doesn't it? And
yes.
for the vision. Did you ever have any doubts, Sally, as you were putting this company together? Did you ever think, gosh, this seems unbelievable that we're starting a publishing company right here?
Well, a little bit, yes. It had been a dream of mine, and to see it really happening, I kept going, am I going to get away with this? This is great. The one thing people would ask me who didn't know much about writing and publishing was, where are you going to get books to publish? I knew there were plenty of those, plenty of wonderful books that from this part of the country and from all over the place that we could use as good raw materials to publish. My doubts were, where are we going to get money to publish? And
that's a good question for all publishers, isn't it?
Question, yes.
For writers, you know, my famous story is that I got a dime once from the Atlantic Monthly, and that sort of fueled my career. You know,
you were a professional.
I was a professional then, but you both have a great deal of professional expertise and did at that time. Did you ever think it might be easier just to go try to apply for a job in New York or Boston than to launch something new and take the risks?
I think that launching something new here and taking the risk of doing that were part of the thrill and excitement. They were to me, and there's something about alternative publishing, alternative being alternative to the regular structures of it, and I don't know, there's just something in my nature that gravitated toward the idea of the difficulties of the alternative. So I don't think I really wanted to be in New York or in the centers of publishing. I think I really loved the idea of starting it right here.
And there were certain advantages to the authors, weren't there? Particularly in the beginning when it was so hard for them to get published with their first book, beginning meaning their first book. For example, you can keep books in print longer.
Yes.
And a lot of your writers were from the Tulsa area. Was that nice that you could have this kind of communication with them, or would you have rather had an office up in New York when things got difficult?
Depends on the author, no. We have really enjoyed the synergy of being able to work with authors here in town or in this part of the country. We've also published authors at a distance, but we tend to have more interface with them, I imagine, than regular publishers do, because we like to involve our authors in a lot of the process of publishing. And even authors who had worked with Doubleday and Random House and all of those loved working with us because of that very thing. They got to have some sort of involvement in the process and really enjoyed it.
And you're known for doing such beautiful books. Was that part of the vision for you too?
I think it was. Our publishing house grew out of the talents of a group of women that had been in a writers club together. Or many of the principals did, and our designer at that time was a friend who was absolutely wonderful designer, and she was a poet and also a graphic designer. She was really able to present something that that said on the outside what was in the inside. You know, you can't tell a book by its cover, but somehow she was able, she had that gift. So she was a gift to us, and I think helped us see what an advantage that was in the marketplace, because we're known now for doing really well packaged books, and certainly that has been something that has, I don't know if it was something that we knew inside, you know, and went out to look for the designer, but she was there and gave us that gift from the very beginning.
So you have the dream of starting a publishing company. How do you go about implementing the dream? Is there a book somewhere, 101 Steps to Starting Your Own Publishing Company, or did you have to learn a lot by trial and error?
Actually, there are books about both about self-publishing and about small press publishing, and how to do it books about publishing. There are a lot of them. We didn't read any of those.
Actually, Sally wrote one of those.
Well, yes, I know she has a well-known book about, but tell us the name of the book, Sally.
Alternative Literary Publishing, 5 Modern Histories, and it was actually a publishing history of some fairly well-known literary works, modern literary works, James Joyce's Ulysses, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and a few of those, and how all these came to be published through alternatives to the commercial publishing establishment. And I did that right before we started Council Oak. That's why I knew that there were some wonderful, groundbreaking works out there that might not be recognized in the commercial publishing establishment that we would have the opportunity to bring out.
We've talked about the support you've had from the community and from our state for Council Oak, and now it's grown and it's national. But was that hard to come by, the national recognition, being accepted by other publishers, for example, and by reviewers, or did that come easily for you?
Both. Of course, we had to work at it, but we were amazed at the kind of reception we would get when we would go to the New York Times or Publishers Weekly and have some personal direct contact with reviewers there. They'd go, "Oh, what you're doing is wonderful. We really want to write about you," and did do some reviews from the very beginning of our books. And I think part of that was the design. Part of it is everybody loves the idea of a small independent publisher with integrity in today's publishing scene.
Oh, especially in today's, I think, and more and more so.
And at the time we started, there was a feeling, actually the New York Times had a policy of trying to find independent publishing, because they too realized that the unique publishing was often out in the field. It was not in New York. And we've always felt that coming from Oklahoma has been an advantage, that it gave us a kind of instant profile. We weren't just another little struggling publishing house in New York. We were different. I just went back to New York just a couple of weeks ago, and again, people were talking about, what are you doing out there? Like we're way out there.
Sure.
To them, you know, we're way out there. But they love the books we just brought out, Bringing in the Sheaves, a very small farm from Oklahoma, and they loved that perspective and wanted to do something and pick up a story there. It gives them something new to think about.
Do you feel, as I do, that you've helped change the image of Oklahoma a little bit? Because we know that some New Yorkers still think of Oklahoma as a dust bowl, and some people still have a stereotyped image of Oklahoma. Do you think your books have helped to change that notion?
Well, I would like to think it had helped somewhat, and we're getting ready to bring out a book in the fall, Big Blue Stem. It's on the tall grass prairie, which is really about the history of the land and the people and the settlement. And we hope that that really tells the story of Oklahoma in a unique and wonderful way. And so we hope that that story gets told over and over again. Of course, we don't just publish books about Oklahoma, but they're usually, I remember at the Oklahoma Book Awards, as a matter of fact, one of our books, Clearest Kitchens, won an award, and Neil Baldwin, who was head of the National Book Award, said that he was amazed, which makes you think, well, why is he amazed, to find a book of that caliber in Oklahoma. So again,
all this praise will go to our heads, won't it?
But yeah, so that's sort of a backdoor compliment.
Well,
thank you, I think.
Thank you, I think. But the very fact that we are having these wonderful books published in Oklahoma shows that the literary support here and the literary influence, and the fact that literary people do congregate here, and that you are attracting nationally known authors. So often with dreams, we have to revise our dreams a little bit once we start to implement them. Did you find once you got started that you had to cut back on some of your expectations?
We're still cutting back. We're still revising. Our conversation on the way over here today was our latest revision of trying to be clearer about what needs to happen, what we can do, how to publish things in ways that are more successful. You have to be smarter in today's changing marketplace, because that is the biggest challenge we're facing, is a changing world. It's not just publishers who are becoming conglomerate. It's like chains, and the independent bookstores are being forced out of business. Your traditional markets are shifting. So it's a very, very difficult world, and one that we're having to revise a lot to be successful in.
And a lot of publishers are.
Yes.
At this point. Tell me about the first book you did. Now, did you start out with just releasing one book, or how many books were on your first list?
We started out in the fall of 1995 and brought out 2 books. One was a reprint of Prairie City by Angie DeBow, which had been published by Alfred Knopf in the 40s. And Angie DeBow, of course, is a wonderful Oklahoma history writer.
Yes.
She was still alive at that time, and it was our privilege to work with her on that reprint. That was a wonderful experience. And that came out on August 30th. It came from the printer, 1995. Then later in the fall of 1995, we came out with Cleora's Kitchens, and got it out just in time for Christmas. That was our very first publication from scratch, you know, where we started and put the whole project together. As I look back, I go, my gosh, we started with the most difficult kind of thing you can do, a big picture cookbook, deluxe affair, and yet we had a tremendous success with that, and it was a real big boost for us. We were able to take those 2 books and go to New York and get a lot of attention because they looked so good. They were such quality publications.
Was it a thrill for you when you picked up that finished book for the first time, those 2 finished books?
Oh, well, it's like having a child. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling that here's something. And it's extraordinary, too, because like a child, you help it and you nurture it, but it has a life all its own, and it changes the world. I mean, that is why people love to write, why optometry is noble a field as that is.
Thanks for saying that, Paulette.
It's still, I mean, finally, whenever you put a book out there, it goes on. It has ripples and ripples and ripples. And those first 2 books were both history. One was a History Book Club selection. One was a Book of the Month Club selection. They both went out and started having these other lives, these other identities. Now, you know, once upon a time when we were colored, has gone on to be a movie. The authors moved on to do to be a major force, I think, for something good. That's why then you start looking at what you're publishing and wait a minute, if this is having all this impact in the world, then I want to do the very, very best thing I can. And not that you only want to publish one thing or another thing, but you want the things that you put out there to be worth the impact they're going to have. So you try.
You try and try, and you all try very hard. What was your first fiction book that you published?
The Silver DeSoto.
Which has become almost legendary in a way, got wonderful reviews. When you see a manuscript like the Silver DeSoto and you're trying to decide whether to publish it or not, what prevails, your literary instinct or your business instinct?
Both have to. The literary instinct has always driven us, and what we're looking at now is we have to bring more of the business instinct in there and make the thing work in terms of both, or we won't be around. You know, obviously we have to do how many of this are we going to sell, at what price, can we produce it cheaply enough and well enough to do that, and will it work in the marketplace?
Well, you're, again, certainly doing well with all of your books, and I want to talk to you some more about all the things that you've going on, but let's take a brief break, and we'll talk about all these authors while everybody else sees a public service announcement.
This is an RSU-TV Encore presentation of Writing Out Loud.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome back to Writing Out Loud. We're talking with Sally Dennison and Paulette Millichap from Council Oak Books, and they're telling us all the secrets of publishing. Okay, 3 people work together in a publishing company. Do you all agree on every book that's published? What happens if 2 of you think that you read a manuscript and think it's the most wonderful book ever, and one says, you know, I really don't like this book?
Well,
what happens?
You know, you have to have consensus. It's so difficult to get something out there, and I think we would rarely publish something if one person just didn't like it. We probably wouldn't do it.
Have you ever misjudged, because we know you've had much more success than you have any kind of book that didn't come through, but did you ever just think that some book was really going to do something for you and it just didn't take off for whatever reason?
Yes, we've had several like that. I think what happened most often was when we would publish something thinking, oh, this is the kind of book they publish in New York and a lot of people read and a lot of people buy. We you know, it's sort of a trade publishing book, something easily, it's like a lot of other books in the market, and we would come out with that, and because it was coming from Council Oak, we wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Booksellers would look at it and go, what's that doing in their catalog? And they were confused by it and just wouldn't buy it.
And I think that for a small publisher, the unique thing, the fresh thing, the thing that you say, aha, that is an honest book. I've been looking for that. So whenever we'd go out with something that was more like what is expected, or, you know, maybe people don't like to read. Maybe they read lots of them, but it just wasn't right coming from a small publisher as we were.
So the challenge for you is to be as creative as your authors, right?
Exactly.
And that must be hard sometimes.
It is.
Absolutely. Is there such a thing as publisher's block, like writer's block, that you just think, what am I going to do?
There really is. There are moments of terror when you say, ah!
What's going to happen here?
What should I do? I think it's sort of like you have this feeling of responsibility, and you think, what is the right thing to do? And then, I don't know, something happens. It's kind of like you have this intuition or this inspiration, and suddenly everything starts to move again. But there are moments when it just stops.
Let's talk about some of the changes. You're no longer doing fiction, is that right? Adult fiction.
That's right.
Why did you make that switch? Was it just not practical for you?
It was not practical for us. We were not having enough success getting the books out there, and that's not good for the author, it's not good for us. So we felt like we will concentrate on the kinds of things that we're having some success with and build on that. Someday, I believe, we will go back to publishing some fiction. That was one of our prime original visions, and I think fiction is very important.
But you're doing so many other wonderful things. Let's talk about some of the, you do children's books, you do history.
That's right.
All kinds of things. So you really, even though you're not doing fiction, you're doing a lot of creative nonfiction.
You know, the thing that has replaced fiction for us is the personal memoir. It's, well, the personal story as memoir. We don't necessarily put memoir as its category on the back of the book, but for example, A Very Small Farm is a personal story. It's a real story, but in many ways it's written like a novel. And Bringing in the Sheaves is a story about a man following the wheat harvest and his dream. So it's a real story of that, and another time might have been a fiction. So what we were realizing was that people's real lives are very interesting, and we have had a lot of success publishing this kind of small book, which is very much like fiction, which is always a part of who we are too.
That's nicely put, and I think it's very true, because these stories are character-driven, narrator-driven.
That's exactly right.
Once upon a time when we were colored.
Exactly.
Exactly that kind of book.
And a wonderful story. You read because you love the character and want to know what's happening. The other change that I've noticed is that you're no longer accepting unsolicited manuscripts, and I know there are really good reasons for that, and I thought we might share with our audience about that and how hard it is from publishers. Sometimes when we're writers and we're wanting so hard to publish something, wanting so much to, it's hard for us to understand, but yet from your perspective, it's very hard for you to deal with all these manuscripts.
Well, and we felt we weren't dealing with them well, and so therefore when someone would send you a manuscript and they didn't hear for 3 or 4 months, it seemed worse, it seemed less kind to the author than not accepting it at all, though Sally might be able to tell you more.
Yeah, we were listed in Writer's Market, and we were getting 10 manuscripts a day and stuff like that, and we just, the three of us couldn't deal with it. It was just too much, on top of running the company and designing books and editing and everything else we have to do. And writers were very upset because they would send things to us, and it was like dropping into a black hole. So finally we just threw in the towel on that. We wanted to be accessible to writers, but we had to find other ways to do it. I think what we try to do instead is let people know exactly what we're looking for so they won't waste their time with us if we're not going to publish the kind of thing they publish, for instance, fiction. So I try to do anything I can to let people know what we're looking for, and then I ask them to submit samples so that I can tell, you know, right off the bat whether it's going to maybe work for us, and then I try to get an answer back to people real quickly on that. But
it's amazing you can do all of that. I mean, really, when you think of all the things that because you're involved in all aspects of publishing. It's not just like you're editing a few choice books. I mean, you're working in the business end. Is that correct? And just in all aspects of design and everything that you're involved with.
We had to get the deposits to the bank today before we could come over here.
So there's there just aren't enough hours in the day, and so I think it's commendable that you're willing to share in that way.
We do have guidelines for submissions too. If people want to know, well, what do you publish, I'd be glad to send a copy of our submission guidelines to anybody.
Thank you, Sally, for telling us about that. And of course, Council Oak is listed in the phone book, and if someone wants those guidelines, probably should send a self-addressed stamped envelope as well.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Well, just covering that deposit, and we want to make sure.
Yes.
Another thing that I want to talk to you about, you're talking about writers. You're writers yourself, so you understand what it's like to submit material and to wait.
Yes.
So it's not like you're coming at this from an opposite perspective.
No, no. We came at it wanting to do the best thing for the writers, and yet finally a publishing company is not in business to serve writers. A publishing company is in business to serve readers. And so some of the things we have to do aren't maybe the most convenient and easy for writers or most amenable for writers, but that's what we have to do in order to serve the readers that are out there.
Do you have time for your own writing anymore?
Sally has more than I have. I have not. It's been a pleasure to me to work with other people, and I have a kind of sense of I don't know, a lot of the same feeling that I got from trying to write myself, I'm getting now from helping other people. It's easier. Writing is very, very hard, Tracy, as you know.
Yes, it's a killer. You know, it can age you quickly.
Absolutely.
We're all 20 years old.
Really? We just look older than that.
Another question I want to ask you, because you're heavily involved in editing, and probably writers who come to you have the luxury of getting more editorial attention than they would at a lot of the so-called commercial houses or more commercial houses. What's the difference? Explain to our audience the difference between editing and copy editing, because I find a lot of times people get that confused. And there's all the difference in the world.
Well, there's editing, there's copy editing, there's proofreading. I mean, there's all different levels, and I think of it as going from the broad things like the structure of the story, and sentence structure and paragraph structure, the larger structures, to okay, are the commas in the right place, and finally down to are there typos. And a person who's good at the larger structures is not necessarily good at spotting the typos. Those are two completely different kinds of skills to my way of thinking. And when I'm doing both, I'll have to go through one time for the larger structures and then narrow my focus and then narrow it again.
We were talking about book design and the importance of it a moment ago, and the cover in order to appeal to readers. Is promotion becoming more and more important in the book business, promoting the books, getting them out there and known? Yes,
absolutely. Paulette has worked more closely with promotion than I have, but we all get involved in it for sure.
Yes, it's a very, very important thing, because how does a person know they want to read this book? And there's so many books in a bookstore, and you go in. How do you make a choice? So that getting the author known, getting reviews on the book. We like radio and television interviews like this. It's a good way for the author to, for people to meet the author, put a face with the book. Of course, word of mouth is still one of the very, very most important things. People buy books because other people tell them they're good books, but you've got to get those first books out there. They're critical. And so to have an author who's able to inspire people to want to read something they've written is a tremendous asset, as Cliff Talbert was too, Once Upon a Time We Were Color.
Well, one of the things I admire is in order to sell your books, though you haven't resorted to sensationalism, for example, on your covers or anything like that. They're all still very tasteful, and even your catalog, and I'm going to hold up a picture, hold up the catalog so you can see that beautiful, beautiful cover here. And again, very tasteful, no blood, no explosions.
That's from Big Blue Stem, the book about the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve.
Oh, it's just gorgeous. Just very pretty. Have you ever been tempted sometimes just to say to heck with a good taste and play this game on this commercial level?
We tried that, and once again, as Sally said, we had a book. I won't give the title or anything of this book, and we thought this is just the kind of sensational thing people want to read. So we will publish this book, and it will sell many, many copies. And of course, we totally were unable. Well, for one thing,
it bombed.
It bombed totally. Well, when you take this into reviewers and other people, they think, well, why are you out there doing that? We have that here in New York or here in California.
There's enough of that in the world already.
And they, I think we were getting a lot of support and recognition and promotion from doing something. Well, if you want to say, we're worthwhile. So when we weren't doing things worthwhile, really the world was not coming forward to give us the help we needed. And finally, we didn't have the clout in the marketplace just to put them out there anyway, so that people might buy them. Obviously, there is a market for that kind of book, but given the way that we publish, we could not reach that market.
Well, congratulations on all your successes and the wonderful authors you represent: Heifler, Talbert, Wallace, Sally Dennison, Paulette, Millichap, Council Oak Books. Thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.